Marcus Devereaux held up 2 fingers, and the crowd went quiet. $2. That was the number he wrote on the board beside her. Claire Whitfield stood in the dirt lot of a roadside gas station outside Millbrook, Montana. Rope wound 3 times around her ribs, a strip of cloth pulled tight over her mouth. She was 28 years old, a diner waitress who had been missing for 11 days. A biker pulled up to the pump behind her. Big man, gray beard. He didn't look twice at first. Men like Marcus had built an entire business on making sure nobody ever looked twice. Then Claire's head dropped, once, twice, a third time, and rose again, slow, deliberate, not the motion of a woman about to faint. The biker's hand stopped halfway to his pocket. A coin slipped from his fingers and hit the gravel. He pulled out his phone and made a call. 4 words. Then 200 members of the Hells Angels stormed in. What happened next? Join me as we dive into the story. And this is Heart Tales, so subscribe if you haven't already. Wade Calloway had learned over the years to read a parking lot before he ever read a face. This one was wrong. An old man in a weathered hat stood beside a hand-painted sign, counting coins like a man closing out a register. A truck idled nearby, doors unlocked, the kind of detail that meant somebody planned to leave fast. And a young woman stood between them, rope at her ribs, cloth at her mouth, her eyes cataloging every exit the way a person does when speaking has stopped being an option. He kept his hands loose. He let his eyes drift past her once, casual, and that was when her head dropped. Once, a pause, twice, a third time, slower, deliberate enough that no frightened woman would do it by accident. Something cold moved through his chest. He had taught that exact signal to exactly one person in his life, 23 years ago, in a garage that no longer existed, to a 4-year-old learning to count her own breath instead of panicking. The old man noticed him now, gave him the kind of nod men give each other at gas pumps. Marcus Devereaux stood a few feet back, arms crossed, watching with the patience of a man who'd already decided how the next 10 minutes would go. "Help you with something?" the old man asked. Wade let his gaze move to the young woman once more. She held still, watching him back. He gave her nothing in return. No nod, no flicker, just a long, level look before turning back to his bike. He pulled his phone from his jacket and scrolled to a name he'd called maybe a dozen times that year. Larkins. Now. All of them. He didn't explain. On the other end, Bobby Reyes was already standing up from his chair, already reaching for his keys, already making the second call that would become a third, then more than anyone could count, spreading across 3 counties the way fire moves through dry grass. Wade ended the call, filled his tank the rest of the way, and climbed onto his bike like a man with nowhere urgent to be. Marcus watched him go and felt nothing about it. He would understand, before the day was finished, exactly how costly that assumption had been. Wade pulled out and turned north, away from Millbrook, not running from what he'd seen, but circling it. 23 years earlier, in a garage on Foster Lane that smelled of motor oil and 2-stroke fuel, 4-year-old Claire sat on an overturned paint can, swinging her legs, watching her father work on a stranger's carburetor with the kind of focus only small children give to things that don't belong to them. That was the summer of the bad nights, a wheeze in her chest that came on without warning, worse in the heat, worse whenever she got scared. One night in late July, it hit hard, her breath catching, her small hands clawing at her own throat as if she could pull more air in by force. Wade carried her to the porch steps because the open air seemed to help, and held her against his chest. "Listen to me," he said low and steady, one hand flat against her back, 3 short ones, then 1 long one. "You don't have to fight it, you just have to count it." He shook his head slowly 3 times, then dipped it once, long and deliberate, so she could see the rhythm before she felt it settle into her own body. It took 11 minutes for her breathing to even out. He counted every one of them. After that night, the signal became a private code between them. Not just a trick for bad lungs, but something she could use anywhere. Her voice might fail to pitch far enough. 3 short shakes, 1 long bow. It meant, "I'm scared and I can't say it out loud. Come find me." Her mother, Diane, left that October, taking Claire one night while Wade worked a double shift. No note, no warning. He spent 2 years searching. Hired a man out of Billings, drove through 4 states knocking on doors, called every name in every old phone book that might have led somewhere. Then a man calling himself a caseworker phoned to say there'd been an accident. A car off a bridge outside Coeur d'Alene. Diane hadn't survived. Neither had Claire. He asked for paperwork. It never came. The number he called back rang into nothing, disconnected, as if it had never belonged to anyone at all. He should have kept pulling that thread. He told himself that 1,000 times over the next 2 decades. But grief is a strange architect. It builds walls exactly where a man needs them most. He stopped looking. He told his brothers in the club he'd lost a daughter, and never told them how. He kept exactly one photograph. A small girl with crooked pigtails, gap-toothed on the same porch steps. He carried it behind his license for 23 years, without showing it to a single living soul. And tonight, a stranger with rope at her ribs had dropped her head 3 times. Then bowed at once, slow and deliberate, exactly the way this frightened 4-year-old once had. There was only one explanation. Bobby Reyes had learned exactly 2 things about calls from Wade Calloway. The first was that Wade never called twice in one day unless something was broken. The second was that when he kept it to 4 words, the situation had already moved past the point of needing more. Larkins. Now. All of them. Bobby didn't ask questions. He grabbed his keys, called the nearest chapter, gave a name, a place, and the weight behind Wade's voice, and that proved to be enough. Each man who answered made his own calls, until the chain stretched across 3 counties like something with its own pulse. Wade rode the long way back, taking the county road behind the tree line, cutting his headlight a 1/4 mile out. He found a rise above the gas station and watched. Nothing had changed. Claire stood exactly where he'd left her, head down now, her stillness reading less like fear than like waiting. The first sign of what was coming arrived as a vibration in the ground, before it arrived as sound. Then headlights. On the Ridge Road, on the access road, from a 3rd direction, Wade hadn't even been watching, until the dark hills were ringed in light, more than anyone standing in that lot could possibly have counted. Marcus heard it before he saw it. He turned wearing the expression of a man whose math had just stopped adding up. Wade came down off the rise at a deliberate pace, 200 engines following him down the hill. He cut his engine 30 yards out and crossed the rest on foot. "Cut her loose," he said, low and flat. The old man stepped between them, both hands raised. "My name is Thomas Wistfield. I am Claire's father." Wade went very still. "She doesn't have a father standing in a parking lot selling her for $2. I've spent 11 months building a case against this man and the network behind him," Thomas said. "Every piece of tonight, the sign, the price, the role I'm playing, it's a sting. Federal agents are 3 miles down this road. She found out what I was doing 3 weeks ago and came looking at the worst possible moment. I couldn't pull her out without tipping off every man watching this operation. So I kept her close, where I could protect her, even from this far inside it." "You had her tied up," Wade said, hands curling into fists without his permission. "You had rope on your own daughter." "I know exactly what I did," Thomas said, something raw moving behind his eyes for just a moment. "And I would do it again if it meant putting this man away for good. She was never supposed to be part of it." Wade crossed to Claire and worked the cloth loose from her mouth. She drew a long breath, the first clean one in what felt like hours. "You're real," she said hoarse. "I sent the signal and I didn't know if you were really." "I'm here," Wade said. He kept his hands loose, gave her the room to close whatever distance she wanted on her own. "I'm not going anywhere. My dad told me you were dead. A car accident. Someone told me the same thing about you," Wade said quietly. "I believed it for 23 years. Behind them, Marcus had gone very quiet, watching the reunion with the flat, calculating look of a man recalculating his odds in real time. "This doesn't change anything," he said, voice losing its ease. "I have lawyers, friends in 3 counties who owe me favors. All of you are about to be the story on every news station in this state." "You're already on tape, Marcus," Thomas said. "Every transaction, every name. The recordings are already with people who know what to do with them. Then, I suppose they need to disappear." Marcus nodded once toward his men. One reached toward his jacket and came out holding a gun. Claire flinched against Wade's side. He shifted his weight, putting more of himself between her and the weapon, now leveled in the harsh overhead light. Nobody needs to get hurt tonight, Thomas said. Put it down, Marcus. You're already finished. This just decides how finished. Marcus looked at the truck, at the narrow gap between two parked vehicles that might have served as an exit an hour earlier. Before 200 motorcycles turned it into a wall of chrome and leather 3 rows deep. There was nowhere left to run. You don't know what you've started, he said, louder now, composure fraying at the edges. I have people, lawyers who will bury every one of you in paperwork until your grandchildren are still paying the fees. Funny, said a voice from the crowd, a big man with a gray beard near the front of the pack. We've heard that one before. A ripple of tired laughter moved through the riders, not cruel, just worn thin from having met this particular brand of bluster too many times before. The man holding the gun looked to Marcus for direction and found none. Up close, the weapon trembled slightly in his grip, not the hand of someone prepared to use it, but the hand of a man realizing, in real time, how badly the night's math had turned against him. Put it down, Wade said, quiet and gentle but final. You walk out of here in handcuffs instead of a body bag. The gun lowered. It dropped into the gravel. Sirens grew close, red and blue light bleeding up over the eastern ridge. Agent Pratt crossed the lot, federal credentials in hand, taking in the rope in the dirt, the gun in the gravel. 200 motorcycles ringed like a fortress wall. Cuff them all, she told the deputies. We'll sort out who knew what, once we're somewhere with better lighting. Wade watched Marcus duck into the back of a cruiser, his calm, untouchable confidence finally crumbling. In the back seat, with the door shut and the noise muffled, Marcus sat staring at his own hands. Something had already started cracking in him. Not guilt yet, just the first cold awareness that the story he told himself about, who he was, had a hole in it he could no longer talk his way around. Beside Wade, Claire let out a long breath. It's over, she said, testing the words. Most of it, Wade said. The rest we'll figure out together. At diner, 12 miles down the road, Claire sat across from Wade and Thomas, a borrowed jacket pulled tight around her, a mug of coffee warming her hands more than she actually drank from it. I don't know what to call either of you right now, she said. You can call us whatever feels honest, Thomas said. We'll work out the rest. She turned to Wade. You really thought I was dead? For 23 years. Someone called himself a case worker, Wade said. I had no reason not to believe him, so I stopped looking. I thought there was nothing left to find. And you knew, she said to Thomas. You knew he was alive, and you never told me. I found out a year after you came to live with me, Thomas admitted, not looking away, though it clearly cost him something. I told myself you were safer not knowing. That was part of it. The other part, I was afraid of losing you. You'd been my daughter since you were small, and the thought of some man walking back into your life and taking that away from me. I told myself I was protecting you. I should have told you anyway. I'm sorry, and I won't make that smaller than it is. I need to know everything, Claire said. I can't decide what comes next until I understand what happened. Then I'll tell you everything, Thomas said. Agent Pratt found them an hour later. Thomas laid out a satchel he'd kept close through the entire night, a thick envelope, a recorder, a notepad of tight handwriting. 11 months of work, he said. Recordings, wire transfers, names across 3 states. Claire looked over the photographs spread on the table, men in pressed shirts and easy smiles. These are the buyers, she said, not a question. Make sure all of it gets used, she told Agent Pratt. Every page. A week later, Claire drove out to the converted barn that was Wade's home and workshop. She found him bent over an old Harley, a wiring harness pulled loose. He nodded toward a stool, the way a man invites someone into a routine he's not used to sharing. They worked in comfortable quiet, passing tools back and forth, the kind of quiet neither of them had expected to find this soon. You used to fix things for me, she said. I don't remember it, but Thomas told me once. Fixed your stroller wheel at midnight once, just so you'd stop crying. Wade said, something almost like a smile pulling at his mouth. Your mother was furious. Said I'd wake the whole building. Squeaked another 2 days, then stopped on its own. Sometimes you do the work, and it's not even the thing that fixes it. Sometimes it's just time. Is that what this is? Just time? Some of it, he said, setting down his tool to look at her directly. Some of it's going to be work, too. The kind you can't rush, no matter how much you want to. I'm not going to pretend 23 years closes up because we both showed up for it. But I'd like the chance to do it, if you'll let me. She nodded once, short and definite, the same gesture he'd seen her make at 4 years old, whenever she'd decided something for herself. When the bike finally turned over clean on the first try, she laughed, short and bright and a little surprised at herself. And Wade heard it the way a man hears, something he'd stopped expecting to hear again. 3 nights after the arrest, Marcus lay alone on a thin cot in a holding facility outside Helena. An indictment in his hand he'd read 4 times without absorbing it. He kept replaying the sound of the gun hitting gravel and the relief on his own man's face afterward. He told himself it was bad luck. It didn't work this time. Near 3 in the morning, he found himself thinking, uninvited, about a buyer's daughter he'd never met and had never once let himself imagine. It wasn't remorse yet, but it was the first crack in a wall he'd spent 11 years building. 3 weeks later, at the federal courthouse in Helena, Claire sat in the gallery with Wade on her left and Thomas on her right. Neither man had asked for that arrangement, it had simply happened. Marcus was led in wearing a jumpsuit instead of a pressed shirt, looking smaller than she remembered, almost ordinary. I provided a service, he told the judge. People came to me because the world failed them. You sold human beings, the judge said, cutting him off without raising her voice. There is no framing of that fact I'm interested in hearing. Sit down, Mr. Devereaux. He sat, something visibly fracturing across his face. Not collapse yet, but the effort of holding together a story that had already started coming apart 3 nights earlier. 2 months later, at sentencing, Marcus Devereaux received 31 years. 4 buyers named in Thomas's recordings were arrested within 48 hours. Before the sentence was read, Marcus asked to speak. I told myself for a long time that none of it was really happening, he said, his old polish gone. I think I knew that wasn't true. I just didn't let myself look at it directly until there was nowhere left to look but at it. His eyes found Claire's. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted it said, once out loud by me. It wasn't forgiveness. Claire didn't offer any and didn't feel she owed it. But it was something, and she let it pass. Outside, the afternoon had turned warm and gold. 2 very different kinds of love, Thomas told her, watch us Wade by his bike. Both of them yours if you want them. Claire walked to Wade first and leaned her forehead against his shoulder without a word. I want dinner, she said. Tonight, the 3 of us. No more secrets at the table. That evening, at a small barbecue place at the edge of town, they talked about small things first, then larger ones. Near the end of the meal, Wade set down his fork. I want to thank you, he told Thomas, for raising her. For loving her when I couldn't. Thomas nodded slowly. And I want to thank you for coming for her. For not being too late. Claire reached across the table and took a hand in each of hers. Her father on one side, her father on the other. And for the first time in 23 years, the silence between the 3 of them felt like something whole, instead of something broken. What had been taken in an instant couldn't be fully returned. But what remained, the dinner, the steady hands, the years still ahead, felt, finally, like enough to build something real on. That, in the end, was the part of the story worth telling. Not the rescue, not 200 motorcycles or headlights or sirens. Just the quiet, ordinary courage of people who chose, again and again, not to look away. If this story moved you tonight, that quiet kind of courage, choosing not to look away, is exactly what Heart Tales is built around. Thank you for staying with Claire, Wade, and Thomas until the very end. If you'd like more stories like this one, hit subscribe so you never miss the next ride. And before you go, I'd love to know which moments stayed with you the most. Drop it in the comments below. I read everyone. There are more stories waiting for you right on this screen. Pick one, and I'll see you there.